Hi, this is Kenny Albert. You're listening to the Broadway Hat Podcast with your host, Kyle Hall, the #1 podcast for all things Rangers hockey.
Well, welcome back to the Broadway Hat Podcast. I'm your host, Kyle Hall, and what an insane week, not only for the New York Rangers, but for the NHL in general. The trade deadline is rapidly approaching. We're a couple days away from it, and since last week, Patrick Kane has now come back into the Rangers' lives. We thought that the Kane deal was dead once they got Tarasenko, but Patrick Kane has now pulled an NBA-style move and said he's going to the Rangers only, and Chris Drury has been performing salary cap aerobics to get him in. Some of the craziest stuff I've ever seen. The Rangers playing shorthand, a shorter guy. They're playing with four defensemen. The Keandre Miller had an unfortunate spitting incident the other night. They're playing down forwards. It's just insane stuff. They've traded Vitaly Kravtsov off to Vancouver for basically a bag of pucks. Well, we'll see what Will Lockwood turns out to be, but a guy who has only played a couple 28 games in the NHL before, but they shipped him out for an AHL player and a 7th-round draft pick, a former first-round pick who personally I thought the Rangers might get a little bit more for in return, but they sent him out to get his cap off. Jake Leschyshyn was put on waivers, and he's now back in Hartford. Braden Schneider didn't play in the game, sat on the bench, but didn't play because he got optioned back to Hartford as well. Ryan Carpenter, same thing, played 13 seconds, came out of a penalty box after serving the Keandre Miller major to make sure he was healthy. Just absolutely crazy stuff that the Rangers are going through in order to get under the cap, because clearly Chris Drury was not planning on having both Tarasenko and Kane, and this kind of came about last week where they're now having to just try everything they can to get on the cap here. And listen, it's crazy. It's crazy, but to add Patrick Kane to this roster, it makes them so much better. That top six is ridiculous. One of the most skilled top sixes I could remember from the Rangers. I mean, absolutely ridiculous. Zibanejad, Kreider. Now you're going to have Patrick Kane, Panarin, Tarasenko, and Vincent Trocheck. Just a loaded top six with a kid line there at the third line. And now your fourth line is Barclay Goodrow, Tyler Mott, and Jimmy Vesey. A shutdown fourth line. Just a great forward group. Now the Rangers have had trouble this week on defense. They've had trouble in transition defense. Igor Shesterkin's looked a little bit shaky back there. Hopefully had a good game against the Kings on Sunday night. Hopefully gets his confidence going a little bit. They only played with 4 defensemen. It was probably the best defensive game the Rangers have played in 2 weeks almost, which is crazy. Ben Harper's playing 30 minutes back there on the blue line, and the Rangers win a game 5-2. Crazy game for the Rangers. Just a really gutsy win, but just insane. The NHL, the NBA trade deadline is always crazy with guys demanding trades and everything. But the NHL, this is nuts. And the Eastern Conference is now stacked. So it all started a couple weeks ago when Bo Horvat traded to the Islanders. That was the first domino to fall, this whole thing. A week later, the Rangers acquired Tarasenko and Mikola from the Blues, and then Ryan O'Reilly gets shipped up to Toronto. And with Noel Acciari, so 2 solid players there for Toronto going that way. And then the Rangers get Mott, a smaller end deal, kind of a depth deal. But then, huge trade for Boston. They get Orlov and Hathaway from the Caps, who all of a sudden they're now turning into a team that's going to be trading away guys. So I don't know what the deal with the Caps is, because I thought they were going for the playoffs. I thought, Ovechkin said he didn't want to rebuild. So they're kind of rebuilding on the fly a little bit down there. And then, huge trade, Tanner Jeannot, who I wanted to go to the Rangers, went to Tampa for about 17 draft picks and Cal Foote, a major deal. And last night, or Sunday night, Timo Meier officially acquired by the Devils. Just a huge trade for the Devils. Didn't really give up a lot either. They gave up a couple prospects and conditional first-round picks, but really good deal for the Devils. And as we're coming on here, Toronto has just acquired Jake McCabe and... who else did they get from Chicago? Is it Lafferty? Yeah, and Lafferty from Chicago. So McCabe and Lafferty going to Toronto. So Toronto loads up with 4 big players. The Rangers have loaded up now with Mott, soon to be Patrick Kane, Vladimir Tarasenko, and Nico Mikola. So they had 4 players. The Eastern Conference is just stacked. And that's without Carolina making whatever move they're going to make. Pittsburgh's in on a bunch of guys, so they're going to make a move too. It's the Eastern Conference is going to be a gauntlet. It is going to be a gauntlet to get through. That first round series right now with the Rangers and Devils is going to be incredible. At the first round series, you can see the Rangers and Devils, 2 teams who are going to have over 100 points with all these stacked players. On the other side, you're going to see the Lightning, play the Maple Leafs in another stack series. It is crazy. It is crazy how good the East is. And the West is just kind of sitting there. The biggest trade in the West is Shea Weber got traded. His contract got traded from Vegas to Arizona. That's like the biggest deal that's happened out West. So I don't know what the GMs out there are sleeping on. Well, I guess they're trading all their guys to the East. But just a crazy deadline. And, it's on the Rangers. So they do, they get rid of Kravtsov, and they get Will Lockwood in a 2026 7th-round pick. And Lecision was put on waivers, and he passed the waivers, and he is now back in Hartford. And will be playing for them. Braden Schneider is just a paper transaction. He will not be playing for Hartford. He'll stay in New York just to clear cap space for a couple days, and he should be recalled for Wednesday's game against the Flyers. And who knows? There could be number 88 here. There could not be. There's a lot of things here, with Ryan Lindgren got hurt against the Capitals on Saturday. A ugly-looking hit from TJ Oshie. We'll see. We'll see what exactly happens there. If he's healthy enough to play, if he sits on the bench possibly and doesn't suit up, but at least they have him out there for cap reasons. There's so many things. And to tell you all that, I brought on PuckPedia owner. I mean, he is so great, Hart Levine, who really breaks it all down, tells you all the scenarios of what happens, and really makes it easy for fans to understand what the Rangers can do, what they can't do. We talk about injuries further out in the year. If Lindgren does go in LTR, what happens there, when they can actually get Kane, how are they going to operate if they do lose a guy, they're going to have to play a game short of man. Everything you need to know further out. Can they rest guys? He answers every question. And listen, I try to make sense of the salary cap. I pretend like I know how to understand it, but really there's so many different things. So it was great to have him on to talk about it, because the Rangers right now, a very busy week. They have Philly on Wednesday, they have Ottawa on Thursday, so they play back-to-back nights. So you would ideally like to get Kane Wednesday, so he plays in both those games. And I'm sure TNT has the game that Wednesday night. I'm sure they would love to have Patrick Kane to pump up some of their viewership there. And then Saturday, a 1 o'clock ABC game against Boston, which that could be Patrick Kane's first game too if they wait until Friday for the deal. Who knows? Who knows what happens with this deal? But Patrick Kane looks like he's headed to New York Rangers. We'll see. Nothing official yet. Apparently, according to a lot of people, a lot of sources, that the deal is done. It's just waiting for the Rangers' cap situation to play out. And Chris Drury is doing everything he can to figure out this cap situation. The problem is that they're going to be basically 1 cent over the cap after this, and they'll be very hamstrung the rest of the way if there is an injury or any issues going forward for the Rangers. But right now, we're days out from, trade deadline's not until Friday, and it is already crazy in the AHL. The Eastern Conference is just loaded up right now. The New York Rangers are just trying to keep pace with everybody. And after a rough week for the Rangers, after that 7-game winning streak, they lose the 4 in a row. They bounce back with a big win against the Kings at home. Shorthanded, and Keandre Miller, I got to talk about that. Obviously, spits in Drew Doughty's face. Whatever it was, an accident. If not, he's come out and apologized. He said he talked to Doughty. I don't think it was on purpose, but the kid's owning up to it. We'll see about a suspension, which could also, we talk about that too in an interview with Hart. Like, how does that play into this whole thing? So just craziness, absolute craziness in the NHL, craziness around the New York Rangers. Just a nuts week. But before we start to do an interview with Hart, I do want to tell you about our sponsors over InTheClutch.com. Playoff season's here. We're almost there. We're getting through this trade deadline. Who knows? There could be a nice little Patrick Kane Ranger t-shirt there pretty soon to be rocking during the postseason. But go to InTheClutch.com now and save 10% off when you use code Broadway. That's InTheClutch.com. Go type in the code Broadway. Save 10% off today on all your merchandise for the hockey playoffs, NBA playoffs, MLB's getting ready in spring training. Yankees down in spring training, and Mets just started their spring training game, so go check out your gear there. Listen, NFL Combine's coming up, the draft coming up. Get your gear for the draft, but make sure you put in that code Broadway to save 10% off at InTheClutch.com today. All right, we're now joined by a man who's extremely busy. He's answering everyone he can on Twitter. I see him constantly talking to people. The owner of PuckPedia, an excellent website. Hart Levine, thanks so much for joining us.
Thanks so much for having me.
So, yeah, you've been a busy man. I've been throwing questions at you. Every Ranger fan's been throwing questions at you, but I need you to break it down in the most layman term possible. Where are we at right now with the Patrick Kane situation for the Rangers? How do they fit him on the cap now?
Okay, well, we should say we're recording this, Monday afternoon. Yeah, things can definitely change quite easily or quickly as we've seen. So I guess should we assume that Miller is going to get suspended? I think that's probably a safe assumption, right? I mean, I guess you never
Yeah.
know, but okay.
Yeah, he's got a telephone hearing. That's all we've heard now. So it could range from a 5K fine to 5 games. I assume he's getting at least a game or two.
So let's say he's getting suspended for a game or two. So as of today, the Rangers sent Schneider down, so they're building up some cap space, and they can actually, if you consider Lindgren hurt, they could actually have less than 20 guys because at the time they sent Schneider down, Miller was not suspended. So, right, that's kind of, I wouldn't call it a loophole, but it's just something to consider. Like if this was in the middle of a suspension, you couldn't send players down to then go below 20 active players. But because as of today, he's not suspended, that allows them to bank some space with Schneider down. So Schneider's down today. On Thursday, or Wednesday, they have a game. So they're accruing some space between now and then. And this is where they have a few different options. If they wanted to add Kane on Wednesday, they could. But one of the consequences of that is then basically Lindgren would be their sixth defenseman. They would have 18 skaters, including Lindgren. And he could either kind of be a last minute scratch and they play one short, or he gets out on the bench, as we've seen them do recently.
Yeah.
So that's one way they could do it on Wednesday. So to do that, it would be Schneider would come up, Carpenter would go down, and they would trade for Kane. And all these scenarios would be Kane obviously coming at only 25% at a 2.625 million cap hit, right? So that's one option, is they want to get Kane for Wednesday and potentially play basically a player short, assuming Lindgren can't play. That's one option. Another option would be push the trade until Thursday. And so then on Wednesday, you'd call up Schneider. You'd actually call up another defenseman, like let's say Liber Hayek, and then you'd keep Carpenter up. That would give you, 20 players without Miller and without Lindgren. So they could basically play a full roster on Wednesday. And again, they could then get Kane on Thursday, or they could play with that same lineup again on Thursday and get Kane on Friday. So those are kind of like the different options. It's really about when they want Kane and when, and if they're okay playing short on Wednesday and Thursday. Keep in mind, the longer they wait to get Kane, the third party team that's going to take 25% of Kane's salary, it saves them basically about $4,000 per day of cash that they would have to pay Kane for that retention each day that passes. So, maybe their third party team wants to push back, but those are basically the options. They could get Kane Wednesday, Thursday, or Friday. It's all a matter of assuming Miller gets suspended. If they want to play basically one short or not for Wednesday and Thursday, assuming Linder can't play.
I tell you what, thank you for breaking
Got
that
it?
down.
Was that
yeah,
clear?
Right? 'Cause we were talking before, we did not see a Keandre Miller spinning suspension coming into play from last night.
I didn't have a line for that in my spreadsheet that I was been modeling out. Yeah.
Oh man, I didn't think that they were gonna actually sit guys. Last night all of a sudden I turn on the game and they're like, oh yeah, they're gonna be dressing guys, but they won't see a shift. I think Ryan Carpenter sat in the penalty box for a 5-minute for Keandre's major, and he just skated across the ice for 13 seconds. That was his, game time last night. But incredible, the hoops are jumping through for Kane is crazy.
It's a lot of maneuvering, and I think it all comes down to they didn't expect to get both Kane and Tarasenko, right? Because I think if they had planned to do both, let's say there were many days this season where they could have sent Schneider down on off days, and they would have had enough space then, and they could have traded for Kane yesterday or today or something, right? So it's all because they not only did they get Tarasenko thinking they were out on Kane, they also they got Mott, which I don't know, they just moved out Gauthier, but still that's another move that they could have made. And then I think finally the fact that Kane really wanted to go there, the asking price is probably reasonable from Chicago. It made them kind of move to plan D to work it out. But again, it wouldn't have been this tight if they had planned even a couple of weeks ago. They could have created the space. They really only need Schneider down for 2 days to make this work. They could have done that any other time, right? It didn't have to be when Lindgren's hurt and Miller's potentially suspended.
Yeah, and I think most of the season the Rangers carried 22 or 23 guys too. So, I mean, obviously they weren't really banking cap to start the year off either.
Exactly. Yeah. I mean and I've noticed that all season, other teams that are buyers that were under the cap, like the Rangers, they have been trying to send guys down on off days and build up cap space. And the Rangers really haven't done that. They've had a 22-ish man roster most of the time. which is interesting. I mean, especially in New York, the travel is not very far. Like you could get guys up quickly if you needed one. And it's just interesting to see that they haven't banked that space. And again, that's part of what's leading to the complicated, maneuvers and having guys sit on the bench and not play because they didn't bank cap space earlier.
Now, it looks like Ryan Lindgren's going to be okay. Last night, they showed him without a sling on in the locker room. But if he were to go on long-term IR, for some reason, there's a setback there. How does that impact the cap then for them?
Well, again, we didn't count Lindgren in these numbers, but let's say they get through after a Miller suspension, they have Kane on the roster, right? They basically have 21 players with Lindgren, so 20 without him. So, you can operate like that. The other thing at that point then is they'd have no cap space. So if someone else got injured, and you like, let's say they had 20 healthy players and then someone got injured, then they'd be moving into the emergency exception rules, which is if you play short for one full game, then you can call up a player with a cap hit up to 850,000 and they won't carry a cap hit. And you can have them on your roster until the injured players are ready, or until cap space opens up. So like the Oilers, for example, right now they have 2 players on the roster not carrying a cap hit because they played short for 2 games. The Rangers can't technically do that now because they actually have cap space available. They can't. They're saving it to add Kane, but once they added Kane and they're kind of capped out, then they could use those emergency recall options. The other thing then, at some point, if someone does get injured, or let's say Lindgren, after they get Kane, he's going to be out long term, they could use LTIR, but that would really not be good to use prior to getting Kane. You'd want to get him in first and then put someone on LTIR, because then you'd be getting that LTIR space on top of your current roster. But again, any kind of moves like that would just be like to fill the spot internally. I've had a lot of questions like, should they put Lindgren on LTIR now and then get Kane? So they could do that, but then it would almost be impossible to get Lindgren off LTIR during the regular season.
Yeah.
And again, if they don't need to do that, they're better off bringing Kane in. And then if something happens, then they could use LTIR, and they already have Kane on the roster, and then they're getting additional space on top of it.
So that was my next question about injuries later. Now, 2 weeks from now, someone goes down with injury. Like you said, they had to play a man short for a game, probably, or they had to play a man short for a game, and then they can emergency call someone the next day.
Yeah, you play short. It's not the game that the player is injured in. It's one game.
The next
that,
game.
right?
Okay. Yeah.
So one full game with one player short allows you to bring up one player with a cap hit up to 850,000 for 0. Like he would be charged for 0 cap hit. Again, until you either have enough healthy players or you open up the cap space.
Gotcha. But right now, I think they'll have 21 with Kane. So everyone healthy. If someone does go down, they'll have to play the 11-7 or. Well, I guess
So let's say by the time they get Kane, let's say that's like on Friday. Let's say it's on the deadline. They would have 20. The way to make it fit is they would have 20 players plus Lindgren plus Miller, right?
Yeah.
So if everyone was healthy, they'd actually have 22.
Okay, so they'll have some type of. So my next question was, obviously late season, the Rangers are comfortable in the playoffs.
Sorry to interrupt. No, sorry, it'd be 21.
21, yeah.
Yeah.
It's Ben Harper's that last guy. If everyone's healthy, he's that last guy.
Yeah.
So late season, obviously last year we saw the Rangers call up some guys up later in the season to kind of take some of the heavy hitters out of the lineup. They don't have that luxury this year, correct?
No. I mean, again, if they do this, they're gonna have they wouldn't even get by the end of the season the ability to add 50,000 of cap hit. They'd be capped out as you can be. So yeah, I mean, it's a matter of that's their roster. They're kind of locked in. Once if they brought Kane in, right, that's their roster. 20 plus a suspended player, so say 21. And unless someone gets injured long term and they need to use LTIR, that's what they're working with, and potentially having to play short and use the emergency recall if that happens. But I mean, they do have some guys in the minors that would qualify with $850,000 cap hit or less, right? Like a Hayek on D, right? I mean, you couldn't use a Zach Jones though; his cap hit's too high. But basically, you're talking anyone 850,000 or lower, and I see quite a few guys there that would qualify.
He has a couple options there. Now, about injuries, what if a goalie goes down? Do they have to play the next game with just one goalie and an emergency e-bug, or is that I don't know the rule about that with call-ups.
They made a temporary change to that last year. But I think that was just temporary. I'd have to check, but I think it's the same rule, but they would encourage them to shuffle and play a skater short than a goalie short, right? Like you could call a goalie up, send someone down, and then play your game short.
Gotcha. All right. Yeah, last thing we need is, me going behind the net there. Is this just all, is there going to be any moves on Friday? Every deal is getting done. Toronto just made a deal. The East is stacked.
Yeah, I know there's still quite a few guys out there, more depth guys. I think most of the big fish are gone. You never know. There's always a surprise wrinkle, someone you didn't expect to go that kind of shocks everyone. But yeah, most of the big fish have gone. But I'm still interested in guys like, Max Domi, who, he's having basically the same season as Patrick Kane and, not nearly as much hype about him. Right. I think a guy like Gostisbehere is going to go. I could see obviously Van Riemsdyk, but he might go in the next day or two. But there's a Nick Jensen, and then then we're moving down the list like maybe a Gavrikov, and then we're talking about maybe guys we didn't see coming or your depth players. But again, there's often a surprise, so I don't want to get everyone too depressed.
Well, I think Rangers fans, once obviously Patrick Kane comes in, it's now just hold on to your seat for the rest of the way. There's no more movement.
Exactly.
Hopefully, this is it.
Exactly.
All right, Hart. Hey, thanks so much for clarifying some of that for us. I know you do a great job putting it out there on your on the Twitter account and everything, but it's a lot easier to sounding when it comes out of your mouth.
Yeah, sometimes it's hard to figure out how to tweet it in enough characters and make sense and get it out of my head and my spreadsheet and onto Twitter. So happy to chat with you.
Yeah, one last question: what team do you like the most out of all the moves being made so far?
Wow, that's a good question. Well, I think Nashville did pretty well last night on 10.
Yeah,
that's quite a haul for him. The Julian Breezewell's comments made a lot of sense. He's trying to win a cup in the next 2 years, and none of those picks are going to help him win a cup in the next 2 years. I do think people overrate draft picks, especially late draft picks. But my only counter to that is I get that the picks to you don't have a lot of value, but they have value to make other moves, right? And it's like, how are you going to deploy those assets to get the most return? But I certainly like that for Nashville. That's a really good deal. I think the Rangers for what they've given up for Tarasenko, Mikkola, and I don't think they're going to be giving up much for Kane. I think that's going to be pretty good for what they're getting. I think, they're going to be giving up. Not much different than like what Tanner Jeannot went for, right? So
for 4 guys,
that's a pretty good deal, yeah. And I think I think New Jersey did well. Like on the Meyer deal, there was I feel like San Jose was shopping in bulk. Like they got a lot of quantity. The quality, I don't know. Like they got the Mukamadulin, who's was a first round pick, and another first pick, but I don't know, for Meyer, who's not a rental. I think that's they did pretty well. They didn't give up anyone that they can't live without. So
yeah, that was unfortunate. I was hoping the Devils give up a lot more than that. When I saw that deal, my brother-in-law's a big Devils fan. I texted him, that's a good deal. I was like, there has to be more, but then no, there was not.
Well, a lot of, like I said, a lot of quantity. Like that was a 13 element trade, which was since we launched the site in 2018, the highest besides that was an 8 element trade or 8 item trade. So there was a lot. But really, Zetterlund's decent, but I don't think he's a top line player, right? And Mukabadulin's a former first, and they gave up a first and a second that could maybe become a first if they make it to the conference final. So for Meyer to basically give up the equivalent of 2.5 firsts, let's call it, it's pretty good because I'm not certain that they can sign him. I know that they're not close right now on an extension talk, but they can't sign him. They can either qualify him for 10 million and have him for next season. So they got him for 2 playoff runs. And if they aren't good next year, they could trade him or just use him as a rental for next season. Or if they can't reach an extension with him, they could trade him and he's going to have a lot of value. Are they going to get exactly what they gave up? Maybe a little less, but someone that could trade for Meyer and sign him to an extension in the summer. To me, that's a first round pick.
There's value. Right? No, there's still value to him. Yeah, they can still flip him for something else.
It's not like when someone's trading like someone's UFA rights where they are going to be a free agent in a week or two, right? Like he's going to have another season. And again, if a team can't get to a deal with them, they could always take that $10 million qualifying option and at least play him. So I think he would have value on the trade market if he doesn't resign in New Jersey.
The Eastern Conference, man. Every day someone else makes a big. Carolina hasn't even made their move yet, so who knows what Carolina's going to do? Because they're going to do something.
And let's see if the West wakes up at some point.
They're not. I don't think there's be players left. There's be no one left. But Hart, thanks so much for jumping on and clarifying all that. Make sure you go check out his website, PuckPedia. I have it on my favorites. I go on there every day. It's such a great site. Thank you for helping out the hockey fan who doesn't need to know everything about the salary cap. You make it a lot easier.
Oh, appreciate that. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much to Hart for joining us. That was awesome. He did a great job breaking it down. He's been unbelievable on Twitter, answering everyone's tweets and trying to make it simple for everybody to figure out what the heck's going on, because it's a lot of stuff, a lot of moving parts, a lot of craziness going on. So it's great to have him on there helping people out, trying to understand what the heck the Rangers are doing. How can they get Kane? The injury situation, the spinning situation, suspensions. There's 1,000 things going on, so I cannot thank him enough. And make sure you go check out his site, puckpedia.com. Absolutely fantastic website for all hockey fans to look at. They have contracts on there, they got trades on there, player agents, anything you need to know about any guys. Go check that out. It's a great website. I use it all the time, especially for our guests when they come on to talk about their careers. And also I find guests through that because I find that agents and stuff through that. So I cannot thank him enough for taking the time. It's so busy. The Leafs trade just broke right before he was about to come on, so I really appreciate him taking the time to come on to explain that to us. And listen, Ranger fans are asking him 1,000 questions, so it's good to get it out there to everybody so you can understand what the heck's happening without having to read 17 threads all in one place. So thank you again to Hart for joining us. And that does it for episode 121 of the Broadway Hat Podcast. Make sure you're following the show on Apple Podcasts. Go and subscribe to the show there and leave us a nice 5-star review. Every 5-star review we do receive $1 is donated to Alex's Lemonade Foundation. So please, if you've not already, go on there, leave a 5-star review, and help an amazing cause fight pediatric cancer. Please make sure you go and follow the show on Spotify as well. Leave us a 5-star review there. You can find the show on Google Play, Amazon Music, Spreaker, Pandora. Anywhere you get your podcast, you can find us there. Make sure you find us on social media as well, on Facebook and Instagram at The Broadway Hat Podcast, on Twitter at Broadway Hat Pod, my personal Twitter account at KHaltonY. For all New York Ranger updates, we'll be breaking every news that comes out this crazy week. Make sure you go check out bellyup.com as well, bellyupsports.com as well. I have a few articles coming up this week about the craziness that is the Rangers and all their latest movements. And also make sure you go and subscribe to our YouTube page, the Broadway Hat Podcast, where we post all our latest episodes, full episodes, clips of the show, and everything else we post there. So thank you guys for listening, and we'll see you next week.